Into Business. Chapter 1. Business Now. Change is the only constant. As we are getting into this chapter, we are going to be reviewing the following concepts. We're going to define business and discuss the role of business in the economy. We'll explain the evolution of modern business. We'll have a brief discussion of the role of nonprofit organizations in the economy, outline the core factors of production and how they affect the economy. We'll go through a description of today's environment and discuss each key dimension within that environment. And finally, we'll take a brief look at current business trends and how they might affect your career choices. So, organizational change. The business world changes frequently, and in order to be successful, businesses should adapt to change, look for opportunities, and steer clear of threats, which is another way of saying avoid pitfalls. They should also analyze their risks and markets and follow ethical practices. They should aim for long-term profits by offering value to all consumers. So businesses provide goods and services to the people with the aim of earning a profit. If a business earns more money than what it spends on producing its goods and services, then it is said to make a profit. On the other hand, if it earns less money than what it spends, then it is said to be in a loss, and that is not sustainable long term. Entrepreneurs are people that invest their time, money, and resources in order to start their own business. As entrepreneurs create wealth for themselves, they produce a ripple effect that enriches everyone around them. Successful businesses have the capacity of increasing people's standard of living, which in turn adds to the people's quality of life. Businesses also contribute to society by providing jobs and new products. They also pay taxes that help the government take care of its different projects. Socially responsible firms try to make society a better place. When we take a look at the history of business, we can identify 5 different eras. The first era is considered the Industrial Revolution that took place during the mid-1700s. And some of its characteristics are there was mass production started to gain ground and big factories started to take over skilled artisan workshops. During the entrepreneurship era, which was during the second half of the 1800s, large-scale entrepreneurs built business empires and generated wealth for society and raised society's overall standard of living. During the production era, which took place during the early 1900s, major businesses refined their production process and created greater efficiencies by increasing productivity and lowering costs and prices. And the best example of this is Henry Ford with his Model T. The marketing era takes place right after the Second World War, and that is when markets shifted from a producer-centric attitude to more consumer-centric. And that was when suddenly consumers had many more choices that they could make. Businesses began to develop their brands in order to help consumers understand the differences between their products and their competitors' products. That's one reason why when you walk down the grocery aisle in America, we have many, many choices that um, have perceived value. You know, what is better between Coke and Pepsi versus private label? These companies work very hard to convince you to buy their product. And finally, we have the relationship era. And what this means is that in today's environment, most firms work very hard to build and nurture long-term relationships with their consumers. If a business meets its consumers' needs, the consumers will be able to give large-scale publicity to the business by saying good things about the business to their friends and relatives. And this is done quite easily using Yelp, TripAdvisor. You can rate your purchase on Amazon. You know, businesses that are in whose business it is to sell products want those good reviews and are very aware of how to maintain those. Now, nonprofits are business-like establishment, but their goal is to make society better in some way. So nonprofits tend to focus in areas of health, human services, education, art, religion, and so forth. Nonprofits employ people, they do generate revenue, they produce goods and services, and they play their part in bringing economic stability and growth. Now, there are several foundations of production that we need to take a look at. So the factors of production, they help an economic system to function, and when there is proper functioning, more wealth is generated. Some of these building blocks include natural resources, which include land, fresh water, wind, mineral deposits, and so on. The value of all natural resources tends to rise with high demand, low supply, sometimes both. Capital includes machines, tools, buildings, information, technology, and so on. It does not, however, include money, but obviously businesses use money to acquire, maintain, and upgrade their capital. Human resources include the physical, intellectual, and creative inputs of all people who work in the economy. And entrepreneurs are people who see hidden opportunities and use their own resources to make the best use of such opportunities. But entrepreneurs don't thrive in an environment that doesn't support them. All of these factors, natural resources, capital, human resources, and entrepreneurship, are important for the success of an economy. And what's interesting about the business environment is that businesses don't operate as a closed system, meaning an independent silo. Businesses are greatly influenced by outside factors, and these play a vital role in determining whether each individual business will succeed or fail. Now, when we dig a little deeper into the business environment, there are 5 key dimensions of the business environment: the economic, the competitive, the technological, the social, and the global environments. The economic environment. Now since the fiscal crisis in the United States that lasted between 2008 until 2011, the government took very active steps on an ongoing basis to reduce the risks of starting and running a business. The result was free enterprise and fair competition, and they flourished. Another key element of the U.S. economic environment is legislation that supports enforceable contracts. So when you make a deal and you put it in writing, those contracts are enforceable by law. In the competitive environment, as global competition intensifies, leading-edge companies have made it their goal to develop long-term, mutually beneficial relationships with customers. Now, creativity matters in this environment. So with global competition, the stakes are high. And recently, the editors of Encyclopedia Britannica explored creativity across countries. And what they did is they put together a list of the 100 greatest inventions of all time. The editors chose the winners. They didn't rank them, but they chose them based on how profoundly the innovations have affected human life, for better or worse. So some of these innovations include the computer, eyeglasses, gunpowder, candles, vaccinations, and the atomic bomb. There's some other innovations that are kind of funny, but they have improved the quality of life. For example, disposable diapers, cat litter, AstroTurf, and Post-it notes. And while most of the inventions on this top 100 list are fairly recent, there are some older ones that you might want to think about. For example, flush toilets were created in the 1500s. And ironically, toilet tissue wasn't invented until 1857. Vending machines were invented in Egypt sometime between 200 and 100 BC. And the construction nail was invented by the Sumerians around 3300 BC. What is interesting, over the past century, corporations, rather than individuals, have been responsible for a growing number of key innovations. Some examples of corporate innovation are camcorder by Sony, the laptop computer by Radio Shack, and Viagra by Pfizer. And this trend is only likely to build momentum as global competition intensifies. Now, how this relates to the United States is that despite our relatively short history, the United States dominates the list of the greatest inventions with 162 out of 325 mentions, or just under 50%. One reason that the United States may be so strong is that our nation celebrates individuality, creativity, and of course, the profit incentive. If we continue to flex our creative muscles, we can find ourselves with a competitive edge far into the 21st century. Now, leading edge versus bleeding edge. The pace at which change takes place just keeps getting faster every day. And there's a difference between leading edge and bleeding edge. So bleeding edge firms launch products that are too far ahead into the market. The customer isn't ready for them yet. And an example of that is the old beta recorders that they went up against VHS, and not only were they more expensive, but the consumer wasn't quite ready